You have no idea who I am, do you? The frail old man muttered, his tired eyes locking onto Alex's. Alex frowned, gripping the steering wheel a little tighter. Something about the way the man said it sent a shiver down his spine. He had just pulled over to help a lost old man. Nothing unusual about that, or so he thought. The man exhaled, shaking his head as if amused by Alex's ignorance. I've spent years hiding from people like you, but you, son, you might be the only person who doesn't want something from me. Alex didn't know whether to feel flattered or alarmed. He was just a struggling single dad trying to get through the night. But something in the man's voice, some deep-buried truth, hinted that this was no ordinary stranger. And in the next few hours, Alex's life would change forever. It was a late autumn afternoon in Kansas City, Missouri. The sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows on the streets. The air was crisp, the kind that made your breath visible in the chill. For Alex Turner, it was just another difficult day. He was a 36-year-old single father, struggling to make ends meet after his wife passed away from cancer 2 years ago. Alex worked 2 jobs. During the day, he was a mechanic at a local garage, and at night, he drove for a ride-sharing service. He had a 6-year-old daughter, Lily, whom he adored more than anything in the world. But the bills kept piling up. Rent was due, car payments were late, and grocery shopping was a luxury he couldn't always afford. The weight of the world seemed to rest on his shoulders. That day, like many others, Alex was driving through a less-traveled stretch of road, trying to pick up another ride. As he navigated the narrow street, he noticed an elderly man standing by the side of the road, stumbling and looking disoriented. The man was wearing an old overcoat and a worn-out hat, and his shoes appeared to be falling apart. He seemed lost. Without hesitation, Alex slowed his car and pulled over. He could tell the man needed help. "Are you okay, sir?" Alex asked, his voice laced with concern. The elderly man looked up, his tired eyes meeting Alex's. I'm lost," the man stammered. "I was supposed to meet someone, but I don't know where I am anymore." Alex looked around. They were far from the main roads, and it was getting late. "I'll help you out," he said, opening the passenger door. "Come on in. I'll take you to a safer place." The elderly man hesitated for a moment, but then gratefully climbed into the car. His frailty made him seem even older than he appeared, and Alex could feel the weight of years on his shoulders. As they drove, the old man introduced himself as Richard Parker. He spoke in a soft voice, but Alex could tell he had lived a life full of experience, perhaps more than Alex could imagine. "Where you headed?" Alex asked, trying to make conversation. "I was supposed to go to my daughter's house," Richard replied, "but I haven't seen her in years. My memory isn't what it used to be." Alex felt a pang of empathy. He couldn't imagine losing touch with Lily. "I understand. Family can be complicated sometimes," Alex said, "but you're not alone. I'll make sure you get to where you need to go." As the minutes passed, Richard started to doze off, the gentle hum of the car lulling him to sleep. Alex, meanwhile, couldn't help but wonder about the man's life. He seemed so helpless, yet there was something about him that felt different. The wrinkles on his face told a story of hardships, but his eyes still had a glimmer of something mysterious. Just as Alex was about to pull onto the main road that led into town, his phone rang. It was a notification for his next ride request, but when he looked at the location, his heart sank. It was a wealthy neighborhood, far from the route he was currently taking. The ride would be a huge payout, possibly enough to cover rent for the next few weeks. But he couldn't just leave Richard in the middle of nowhere. "Sorry, Richard," Alex muttered to himself, his fingers tight on the steering wheel. "I need the money, but I can't do this." Alex glanced at Richard, who was still asleep, looking so fragile. But then, the strangest thing happened. As Alex's gaze lingered on him, he saw the man's hand twitch. Richard's body shifted slightly, and his coat opened just enough for Alex to catch a glimpse of something. A glint of gold. A shiny, expensive watch poked out from under the sleeve. Alex frowned, his curiosity piqued. He had seen plenty of wealthy people in his day, and they all had one thing in common: expensive taste. But this man, this frail old man, didn't seem like someone who could afford such luxury. He hadn't said anything about wealth, and he looked far from being a billionaire. Shaking his head, Alex decided to ignore the thought. Maybe it was just a coincidence. Or maybe the watch wasn't as valuable as it looked. But the more he thought about it, the more it gnawed at him. As they reached the main road, Alex pulled into a gas station to stretch his legs. He stepped out of the car, leaving the engine running, and walked to the payphone nearby. The ride request had already been confirmed, and he needed to decide quickly. But before Alex could make the call, Richard stirred in the passenger seat. His eyes slowly opened, and he blinked at Alex as though waking from a dream. "Where are we?" Richard asked, his voice still shaky. "We're just taking a little break," Alex said quickly. "You feeling okay?" Richard nodded slowly, but then his eyes scanned the area as if searching for something. His gaze landed on the gas station sign, and something seemed to click in his mind. His tired eyes widened for a second, but before Alex could ask him what was wrong, Richard muttered something under his breath. "Get me to the city. I need to go to the city now," Richard said, his voice urgent. Confused but wanting to help, Alex nodded. He didn't know what had just happened, but he complied, pulling back onto the road. The drive was silent except for the hum of the tires on the asphalt. Richard's eyes remained fixed on the horizon, his fingers nervously tapping the armrest. As they neared the city, Alex's phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a ride request. It was a text message from his boss at the garage. "I need you to come in early tomorrow. Big job. You'll get a bonus if you can fix this engine by morning." Alex sighed. It was another impossible task, but he couldn't afford to turn it down. He glanced at Richard, who seemed lost in thought. Suddenly, Richard spoke again. "You don't know who I am, do you?" Alex shook his head, unsure what to say. Richard let out a soft chuckle. "I suppose I should introduce myself properly." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out an old leather wallet. He handed it to Alex, who took it hesitantly. Inside was a business card, and the name on it read, "Richard Parker, CEO, Parker Enterprises." Alex's eyes widened. Parker Enterprises, one of the largest tech companies in the world. He had heard of it before, but he never expected this frail man to be the billionaire behind it all. "I've been hiding from my past," Richard continued. "Too many people want something from me, Alex. But you stopped and helped me without asking for anything in return. I've been searching for kindness like that." Alex didn't know how to respond. He had never imagined that a small act of kindness could mean so much to someone, especially a man of Richard's stature. "I didn't do it for money," Alex said, his voice soft as stone. "I just saw someone who needed help." Richard smiled, a look of deep gratitude in his eyes. "You're a rare man, Alex. You may be struggling, but you have something money can't buy, compassion." By the time they arrived at Richard's mansion, Alex's head was spinning. Richard had asked him to wait for a moment while he went inside to retrieve something. He returned moments later with a large envelope and handed it to Alex. "This is for you," Richard said. "A gift for your kindness." Alex opened the envelope, his hands shaking. Inside was a check made out to Alex Turner for $1 million. Alex couldn't believe his eyes. This is too much," he stammered. Richard nodded. "It's not about the money, Alex. It's about paying forward what you gave me. A small act of kindness can change the world, and you changed mine." With that, Richard turned and walked back into his mansion, leaving Alex standing in the driveway, holding the check in disbelief. The next morning, Alex deposited the check into his bank account. It was enough to pay off all his bills, give Lily the life she deserved, and perhaps even take some time off to figure things out. He had been given a second chance, thanks to a simple act of kindness on a lonely road. As for Richard Parker, he disappeared from Alex's life as quickly as he had entered it. But Alex would never forget the lesson he had learned, that sometimes, when you least expect it, a small act of kindness can change everything. And that, Alex thought, was the greatest gift of all.